There's an argument out there about whether writing is a craft or whether writing is an art. Personally, I think that writing is a craft, and the more you work at it, the better you can get. Because some people are really gifted with an imagination or with ideas. Those translate into really beautiful, wonderful stories, really imaginative stories. So I do think it is an art as well. Having said that though, the reason I think that it is also a craft is because you can have that wonderful idea or the biggest imagination in the world, but if you don't have the writing skills and you don't know how to actually put pen to paper and write a compelling story, nobody's ever going to read it, nobody's ever going to respect it, and it's going to mean nothing. So I think that writing is both things. I think it is a craft and I think it is an art, but I think that the craft is necessary to make the art come to life, if you catch my drift. That's why today I wanted to go over these 5 books right here that I've read in the past. I go back to them from time to time while I'm thinking about writing or whether I'm thinking about reading and I need to do some research, or I need to just look something up or just hone my craft a little bit, or just tinker with something very, very small. These 5 books really help me from time to time. So I just wanted to share them with you really briefly, and hopefully, maybe if you guys want to get them, you can reference them as well and use them for research like I have. And I think that they will definitely make you a better writer and take your writing to the next level. Now, I'm going to start with my favorite, and that's this one, Becoming a Writer by Dorothy Brand. This book is very old. It was actually published in 1934, and it's been reprinted over the years a number of times. But basically what this book talks about is kind of what's needed to mold a person into a writer. Dorothy Brand talks a lot about like the practices into becoming a writer. One thing that I really took from this was the necessity to be consistent every single day. And writing first thing in the morning. I thought that was really interesting with this book. She talks about, if you're a coffee drinker or if you need tea, whatever, set it up the night before if you can, so that as soon as you wake up, while you're still sleepy and your mind is still in a dreamlike state, you get right to your desk. Nowadays, it would be your computer, I would assume, unless you're writing by hand, which I still do sometimes, but not everybody does. But you get right to your desk and you start writing immediately while you're still in that sleepy dreamlike state. Doing that will allow you to be more imaginative and more creative, and better ideas will flow out of you. At least that's what Dorothy argues here. Also full of a lot of the Dorothy Brand's theories on what makes a good writer. Along with teaching some craft, most of this book is about kind of, what it takes to be a writer and developing good habits. But a really interesting theory that Dorothy Brand has, the necessity of some kind of mindless physical activity. She talks about how creative people or imaginative people or writers have, some mindless things, whether it be needing to go for a walk. She talks about one person she knew who liked to whittle. She talked about another one who liked to clean, had to clean, and once done cleaning, that person was better able to write because of that mindless activity. And I know that personally. I have 2 dogs. I like to take the dogs for walks constantly. Me and my daughter, we go out for walks constantly, and a lot of times when I am out walking, I'm thinking about things. It's not always about what I'm going to write, but I'm thinking about what I had read. Now I'm thinking about this channel and kind of what videos to make. But I think that being a writer, it's very important to think constantly. You have to always be thinking. And that's something that Dorothy Brand really places an emphasis on. Now, the second book is called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. And this book is actually very similar to Dorothy Brand's book. Some of the stuff that Goldberg talks about are kind of the same as Dorothy Brand in terms of needing to write every day, having notebooks. But I feel like Goldberg kind of goes a little bit more into detail about the actual craft of writing. One of my favorite things that she talks about in here is the necessity for writers to learn. Now, she talks about young writers specifically, but anybody really this can apply to. But Goldberg talks about having the imagination to not believe that 1 + 1 = 2. I quote, 1 + 1 could equal 48. Those are some of the things that she talks about in this book to kind of just allow you to think outside of the box, the necessity of thinking outside of the box and having an imagination. That's important for writers. One of the big similarities between this book and Dorothy Brand's Becoming a Writer is Goldberg talks a lot in here about, being comfortable with the way that you write and kind of how to write. She mentions in here, go to the stationery store, pick out the perfect paper, pick out the perfect pen. Just don't spend too much time in that stationery store where then you are not writing. This is probably the least exciting one of these books, but if you could see, this is The Elements of Style, and my copy is just torn to pieces. I've been through this book a ton of times. This is actually a special edition that has like pictures in it and everything. But there's nothing really exciting about The Elements of Style. I think every writer should own this book or knows about this book. This just kind of breaks down, how to perfect your prose, kind of word choice, the rules of writing. But remember, even though this does give you the rules of writing and helps you with word choice, the rules are meant to be broken. Don't forget that. The fourth book is John Gardner's The Art of Fiction. Now, this book is a real heavy hitter. John Gardner is actually a very, very famous creative writing teacher, and where I got my graduate degree at Wilkes University, a couple of the members of the faculty there actually learned from John Gardner, and he was a big help from them, and they passed on a lot of that knowledge that they got from him onto us. Now, this book is actually a lot more specific than the last three books I just talked about, because this one actually talks about fiction and, the writing itself. Not so much the rules of writing, but what it takes to create great fiction. The mastery of language, the necessity to be artistic and creative in your thought process. And, John Gardner actually makes some interesting arguments in here as far as the lines that can be drawn between an amateur and a professional, because he argues that, someone can have a short story. They could turn in, one of his students can turn in a short story and, it not be very good. But if they learn the rules of writing and they learn how to, properly put together sentences, and they learn, the best word use, then the lines will blur between amateur and professional. And you might look at that piece and wonder, was this a published person who wrote this, or was it an amateur? And that's just based on, word choice and the way you structure sentences. And last but not least, this book is probably the most well-known and the most famous for creative writers, but this is Stephen King's On Writing. Now, personally, I don't know. I mean, I like Stephen King. I'm not the biggest Stephen King fan, but I didn't get too much from this book. And again, I've read this probably 2 or 3 times, but it just really doesn't do it for me, but that's okay. I mean, I really like The Elements of Style, and that's easily the most boring of these books. I mean, however you look at it, it's the most boring. But this book does have some good stuff in it. The main thing that I got from this, I did get good stuff from this, and the main thing I got was Stephen King's, when he discussed the muse. And kind of like Dorothy Brand, kind of like Goldberg, kind of like John Gardner, they all talk about the necessity of writing, getting in good writing habits. Stephen King implores you to keep on writing even when you don't have inspiration, even when the muse isn't there. And that sometimes the muse isn't there and you still have to keep writing. But if you leave the door open for it, and by leaving the door open, what he's talking about is staying vigilant, continuing to write, continuing to be disciplined, and working on your craft. If you do those things, eventually the muse will walk through that door and it will inspire you. So this is a good one, but out of these 5 that I talked about here today, this is my least favorite. But again, having said that, that doesn't mean there's not really good stuff in here. I think that you guys should check out all 5 of these books if possible. You can get them at your local library. I'm sure you can get them at a local university. Or if you are at a university now or in school now, you could probably check at least one or some of these out, from your school library.